Welcome to the Writing 1 presentation, Transitions. To follow along with this presentation, you'll want to be looking in How to Write Anything, Chapter 29. As with many presentations, this won't go lockstep with a book. I cover things the way that I want to, but you'll want to have it open and browse it for reference, and some things you'll want to look at as I do there. The page numbers for a pocket-style manual, those largely deal with how transitions will work in terms of the grammar and punctuation. Also, some of the words that you might want to use as transition words, there are really good examples in the pocket-style manual. So I may not mention a whole lot in the presentation directly related to that book, but you should have it open and be looking at it, especially as you start working. Let's talk about a couple of key terms that have to do with transitions. These are terms that you're going to hear some instructors and professors use. These are terms that may come up in feedback for your paper. So let's talk about what they mean. First is cohesive. That means when a paragraph, paper, or other group of words holds or sticks together well. You've probably heard the term adhesive. That's what glue or something like that is. Same idea here. Cohesive, things hold together well. The term coherent means when sentences and paragraphs flow from one to another without discernible bumps, gaps, or shifts. And we can see where that is defined. And what we want to keep in mind when you hear these words, cohesive, again, has to do with things holding together well. Maybe the whole paper, maybe a paragraph, something like that. Coherent then has to do with how it flows smoothly, basically. So what do we mean by transitions? I mean, this is a really important concept. This is going to be a major part of your writing growth this semester, is learning how to use transitions well, so we want to make sure we know what that means. So standard definition is moving from one idea to the next. And we can think about the word in our everyday life, transitions. Some people have transitions eyeglass lenses, where it allows you to move from indoors to outdoors and back without really hurting your eyes. Your eyes can adjust because your lenses adjust as you transition from one place to another. Oftentimes people use that in talking about life as well. You're transitioning somewhere along the line in your lives. You might be transitioning from high school to college. You might be transitioning from the workforce to college. You might be transitioning as you're still working and transitioning into being more of a college student. You might be transitioning in your relationships with a significant other, or you might be transitioning into parenthood. A lot of us have transitions in our lives. So let's talk about what this means in a paper. College writers use transitions to show relationships and idea development, not just sequence. So sometimes you'll hear us talk about transitions and say, well, you need a transition for every paragraph at the beginning and the end, and that's a good thing, but transitions often happen within the paragraphs as well for those reasons that we just talked about. We can also use our transitions not to just connect paragraphs from one to the next to kind of chain them together, but also we want to use transitions to remind the readers about what our thesis statement is. And so we're going to maybe have some hint with that. In larger papers, sometimes entire paragraphs function as transitions as well. With this ridiculous image up on the screen, let's talk just for a moment about why transitions are so important in your writing. If you don't use transitions, we'll start with the negative ideas here, I guess, that if you don't use transitions, then you end up with a paper that's what we would call disjointed, or if you want to go back to those key terms, it's not cohesive or coherent. It's not sticking together and it's not flowing smoothly. It seems like it's a bunch of random ideas all thrown together and you're just jumping from one to the next to the next. Sometimes when we write, we can see how things are related to each other. We can see how these three different pieces of research and these three different points all have to do with one common idea, one common argument we want to make. But without transitions, we're not going to show readers how they relate to each other. That's why it's very important. The other reason is for organization's purposes. Your readers shouldn't have to guess where you're moving from one idea to the next. They shouldn't have to guess how things relate, and they should be able to follow you pretty easily, and you're going to use transitions for that reason. Here are some common transitions that we use, but these are reasons we use transitions: to show addition, to give examples, to compare, and to contrast. And you can see lots of examples there on the screen in front of you. I won't go through and read them all aloud, but you're capable of reading those yourselves. What I recommend often when you're writing, you should actually have a list of transitions open, whether it's in the Hacker book or maybe print this out or find lists on the internet. You can find good lists of transitions and use those as you go back and revise your writing to include those and to have some variety in the transitions that you use. We can also use transitions for these reasons: to summarize or to conclude, to show time, and this is especially helpful when you're using a sequence and organizing your paragraph, to show place or direction. Don't forget the importance of these. Sometimes when you're writing things for readers, you want them to see what you see, and we forget to put the most obvious things in there. And then we also want to use transitions to indicate logical relationship. A little bit more explanation on that. What that means is that you're often showing cause and effect, right? And so these are things that will show how things relate to each other, whether it's cause and effect or other reasons. Let's talk about some other strategies for using transitions effectively too, and how to actually do this. You can use sentence structure and parallel structures, and you can look at some examples in the Hacker book there, or in the How to Write Anything on how to actually do this. And there they're repeating some key words, which we'll get to next on our slide here about repeating keywords on purpose, but they're also using the there is, it is as their first sentences for their paragraph. And while the use of there is and it is, those are kind of vague sentence structures to use, and I don't always like to see a whole lot of there is and it is. In this case, the author is doing that on purpose because he wants to highlight that key term of anger. So we can use our sentence structures to provide some good transitions, and again using keywords. What I also recommend is that you read through your drafts looking only for weak transitions at least once. And when you go through your whole revision process, you want to read through your paper a number of times. And so I think pinpointing different things different times through is a good idea, and I highly recommend using one of those times just to look for where you need some help with transitions.